As I sit here staring out of the window, the world outside feels so alien, like a vast, sprawling place where everyone else seems to belong except me. It's not just the scenery, it's the way life moves around me, a rhythm I have yet to understand. At 22, I find myself just beginning to comprehend the complexity of relationships and love, concepts that seem second nature to everyone else but remain a mystery to me. It feels as though I've been a spectator in my own life, watching from the sidelines as others dive headfirst into experiences I've only read about or imagined. People my age seem so seasoned in the art of connection. They've navigated the labyrinth of love, from first dates to breakups, and emerged with stories to tell and lessons learned. They exude a confidence I can't relate to, a sense of ease in sharing their lives with someone else. For me, relationships have always been like a foreign language, beautiful to hear but incomprehensible without translation. I wasn't like the others. Growing up, I was the shy girl, the one who preferred the quiet company of books and dreams to the chaos of social circles. I didn't have a bustling friend group or a string of teenage crushes. My world was small, intimate, and safe. It revolved around academics and aspirations, with little room for anything or anyone else. Perhaps it was the way I was raised. My parents emphasized independence and self-reliance. They taught me that education was paramount, that love and relationships were distractions better left for later, once life's important milestones had been achieved. And for the longest time, I believed them. I threw myself into my studies, into building a future that aligned with the vision they had for me. But somewhere along the way, I started to feel a quiet longing, a subtle ache for something I couldn't quite name. I often wondered what it would feel like to share my world with someone else, to let them in and see the parts of me that I kept hidden even from myself. But the idea of stepping out of my comfort zone terrified me. Vulnerability felt like a risk I wasn't willing to take. It was easier to stay in my bubble, where the walls were familiar and nothing could hurt me. Looking back, I realize how much I missed by staying in the shadows. While my friends navigated the highs and lows of young love, I observed from a distance. I listened to their stories, the thrill of first dates, the heartbreak of goodbyes, and felt both curious and relieved. It seemed like such an emotional roller coaster, one I wasn't sure I could handle. And yet, there was a part of me that felt like I was missing out on something fundamental, something that made life richer and more complete. Now, here I am, at university, surrounded by a world so much larger than the one I left behind. The campus hums with energy and possibility. Every day, I encounter new faces, new ideas, and new opportunities that challenge the person I thought I was. It's exhilarating and overwhelming all at once. I watch as couples stroll hand in hand, as friends laugh together over coffee, and I wonder, could I ever be a part of something like that? Could I let someone in and allow myself to experience the closeness I've always been too afraid to seek? For the first time, the idea of love feels less like a distant dream and more like a possibility. But even as I entertain these thoughts, the familiar fear creeps in. What if I'm not ready? What if I open myself up only to get hurt? High school feels like a lifetime ago, a time when my world was defined by the four walls of my room and the pages of my textbooks. I was content then, or at least, I thought I was. I didn't crave the excitement of dating or the intricacies of relationships. My focus was singular, my future. But now, that world feels so small compared to the one I've stepped into. University has opened doors I didn't even know existed. And with each step I take, I feel a little braver, a little more willing to explore what lies beyond my comfort zone. I've started to meet people who inspire me, who challenge my perceptions and push me to grow in ways I never anticipated. They are bold and unafraid, navigating the social scene with a confidence that leaves me both awed and envious. Their openness is contagious, and slowly, I'm beginning to let my guard down. The process is far from seamless. There are awkward moments and missteps, times when I feel like an imposter trying to fit into a world I don't fully understand. But there are also moments of connection, genuine, heartwarming moments that remind me why it's worth stepping out of my shell. Conversations that go beyond the superficial, shared laughs that linger in my memory, and an emerging sense of belonging I've never felt before. For the first time, I'm beginning to see life as more than a series of goals to achieve. I'm learning that relationships, whether romantic or platonic, add color and depth to the otherwise black and white canvas of ambition. There's so much I don't know, so much I have yet to experience, but I'm starting to believe that it's okay not to have all the answers. Standing on the edge of this new chapter, I feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. The road ahead is uncharted, and I know there will be challenges and heartbreak along the way, but there will also be joy, discovery, and growth. For the first time, I'm ready to step into the unknown and see what the world has to offer. What I have to offer. Life is too short to stay on the sidelines. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for me to dive in. Perhaps this was the beginning of something much larger. Something I had never even dared to imagine myself being part of. It didn't take long before I found myself venturing into unfamiliar terrain. My very first relationship. His name was Daniel, and of all places, we met at the university clinic. At first glance, our meeting seemed ordinary, even forgettable. He was from the computer science department, and I assumed he was just another student, someone whose face I might recognize for a fleeting moment and then promptly forget by the next week. To be fair, romantic encounters had never been a regular part of my life. I wasn't the kind of person who attracted or sought that kind of attention. My world was smaller, simpler, and often limited to books, lectures, and a handful of close friends. But Daniel was different. There was something about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, that made me pause. It wasn't just his warm smile or the calm, steady tone of his voice. It was the way he made me feel seen. In a world where I often felt like just another face in the crowd, Daniel had a way of making me feel like I mattered. He wasn't the flashy type who commanded attention the moment he walked into a room. Instead, he carried himself with a quiet confidence, a kind of understated charm that felt genuine and refreshing. He didn't try to impress or overwhelm me, nor did he push for more than I was willing to give. It was this unspoken respect for my boundaries that drew me in. I felt safe around him, something I hadn't realized was so important to me until then. When he first asked for my phone number, I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't like him. It was more that the concept of giving someone my number, let alone starting a relationship, was so foreign to me. But there was something about Daniel that made me take a chance. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment. It was simple and sincere, and that's what made it feel right. What followed was an entirely new experience for me. For the first time in my life, I was talking to a guy on a regular basis. First, it felt awkward and unfamiliar. My fingers would hover over the keyboard, unsure of what to say or how to respond. I had always been more comfortable keeping my thoughts to myself, but now I found myself opening up in ways I never expected. It felt a bit like learning a new language, one filled with uncertainties and unspoken rules. Our conversation started out simple, small talk about classes, professors, and random topics. But as the days went by, they deepened. We began sharing pieces of our lives that went beyond the surface. He told me about his family, his childhood, and his aspirations. I found myself doing the same, revealing parts of myself I usually kept hidden. It was strange and exhilarating all at once. For someone who had spent so much time living inside her own world, this connection felt like stepping into a new dimension. I started to look forward to his messages, to the way he made me feel heard and valued. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he listened, the way he seemed to genuinely care about what I had to say. That level of attention was new to me, and it was both comforting and a little unnerving. I began to wonder, could this really be the start of something real? As the holidays approached, Daniel invited me to spend some time with him. It felt like a big step, one that both excited and terrified me. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but his kindness and patience made me want to try. He didn't rush me or make me feel pressured. Instead, he let me set the pace. And that made all the difference. On the day of our outing, he picked me up in his sleek, well-maintained car, a subtle but undeniable symbol of the life he was building for himself. As we drove through the city, the soft hum of music filled the car, and the night sky stretched out above us like a vast, open canvas. It should have been perfect, and in many ways, it was. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of my depth. Daniel seemed to have it all together. He was confident, successful, and had a depth of knowledge that amazed me. His world felt so different from mine, so much larger and more polished. I couldn't help but wonder if I truly belonged in it. Did I have anything to offer? Or was I just a fleeting distraction in his otherwise well-ordered life? As we sat together that evening, sharing stories about our lives and dreams, I found myself opening up in ways I never had before. I told him about my sheltered upbringing, about how this was my first real relationship, and how uncertain I felt about everything. And then, in a moment of vulnerability, I shared something I had never told anyone else. I was a virgin. I admitted that I had never been with anyone in that way, that I hadn't even fully explored my own desires. It was a truth I had carried quietly for so long, and saying it out loud felt both terrifying and liberating. But Daniel didn't judge or make me feel small. He listened with the same patience and kindness that had drawn me to him in the first place. That night, as we talked and laughed and shared parts of ourselves, I realized something important. This wasn't just about whether I was enough for Daniel. It was about recognizing that I had value too, that I brought something to this relationship that was just as meaningful as what he brought. For the first time, I began to see myself not as an outsider in someone else's story, but as an equal partner in something that was just beginning to unfold. And in that realization, I found a quiet strength. This was new territory for me, but it was also a chance to grow, to learn, and to discover parts of myself I hadn't known were there. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to take the next step. Wherever it was something I'd never really felt the need to explain to anyone. But with Daniel, there was something about the way he made me feel, something in the way he listened to me, without judgment or expectation, that made me want to open up. It was as though he created a space where vulnerability was not only welcomed but accepted. The words I was about to say hovered between us, and I felt a surge of doubt. For a moment, I almost regretted speaking up. Would he think I was naive? Would he look at me with pity or, worse, look at me like I was some sort of anomaly? I braced myself for the possible discomfort that could follow. But as soon as the words left my lips, I stole a glance at his face, trying to gauge his reaction. To my surprise, his response was completely different from what I had feared. Daniel went quiet for a moment, seemingly processing my words, his gaze steady but thoughtful. There was no judgment in his eyes, no sign of awkwardness in his silence, only genuine surprise. I held my breath, wondering what he would say next. Would he mock me? Or worse, would he pull away? But instead, Daniel responded in a tone that was calm and reassuring, as if he had just heard something profound and deeply human. "I admire your honesty," he said, his voice steady, "and I respect your decision to stay true to yourself. It's rare to meet someone who has chosen this path." I felt a shift inside me, a kind of warmth that spread through my chest. Rather than feeling exposed or vulnerable, I felt seen, in a way that I had never experienced before. Daniel's words didn't feel like an obligation or a hollow compliment. They felt like a recognition of something deeper. He didn't push me to explain myself further or press me for more details. He just accepted it, and in doing so, he accepted me. It was as though my decision, one that had always felt so personal and perhaps a little isolating, had found a place of understanding. His reaction was nothing like what I had anticipated. He didn't seem uncomfortable, nor did he turn the conversation awkward. Instead, Daniel's acceptance made me feel stronger, more valued. It was the first time in my life that someone had respected my choices so completely, without any hint of judgment or condescension. He saw beyond the surface, beyond the easy assumptions, and into the essence of who I was. He went on, his tone thoughtful and sincere, telling me that he was impressed by my decision to remain steadfast in my values. In a world that often seemed to discard principles in favor of convenience or social norms, he said, it was rare to find someone who held fast to what they believed in. His words filled me with a sense of peace, a reassurance that I wasn't alone in my choices. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't obligated to apologize for who I was, for what I believed, or for the choices I had made. It was liberating. It was a small but powerful moment, one where I realized that, perhaps, I had found someone who truly understood me, someone who didn't just see me as an ideal or an image, but as a person, with real thoughts, real values, and real decisions. But as the evening went on, just as I had begun to relax and feel more at ease with Daniel, he dropped a bombshell that sent my thoughts spiraling. Without any preamble, he casually mentioned that he was heading to the hospital to donate his sperm. My mind froze, the words hanging in the air between us like an unexpected gust of wind. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It took a moment for the full weight of his words to register. Sperm donation? It sounded so unusual, so foreign, and yet he spoke of it with such casualness, as though it were nothing more than a routine errand. I couldn't help but feel disoriented. Why would he tell me this? What did it mean? My mind raced as I struggled to process it. I had read about sperm donation before, but hearing it mentioned in real life, especially in such a matter-of-fact way, felt surreal. Daniel seemed to notice my silence and the confusion written on my face. He smiled softly, almost as though he had expected my surprise. "It's something I've been doing for a while," he explained. "It's not a decision I made lightly, but it's something I believe in. It's important to me, and it's something I do regularly to help others." His voice was calm, almost clinical, as he shared that his decision to donate sperm wasn't about impressing anyone. He wasn't trying to appear self-righteous or virtuous. Instead, it was a deeply personal choice, one that aligned with his values. He believed that by donating, he could offer others the opportunity to build families, something that many people couldn't do on their own. He framed it as a small sacrifice on his part, but one that could have a profound impact on someone else's life. First, I didn't know how to respond. The concept of sperm donation felt so foreign to me, so out of the ordinary. Yet, as he spoke, I could see the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't sharing this as an anecdote or as a way to present himself in a particular light. He spoke about it with a sense of conviction, as though it was just another layer to his identity, a choice he made because it mattered, because it could help someone else in a way that few other actions could. The more he spoke, the more I began to see that Daniel wasn't just someone who cared about his own life, his own choices. He was someone who thought beyond himself. His willingness to do something that might seem unconventional or even strange to others revealed a side of him that I hadn't expected. I could see the selflessness in his actions, and while I didn't fully understand the decision, I couldn't help but feel a deep respect for him. He went into the clinic, and I sat there alone in the car, my mind swirling with thoughts. What was going on in his life? Was this just another part of his routine, or was it something more? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led into a world I wasn't fully prepared for. But even though I was still trying to wrap my mind around everything, I appreciated Daniel's honesty. He was sharing these intimate parts of his life, not because he wanted to impress me, but because he trusted me with them. When he came back, everything seemed to return to normal. He got into the car, and we continued our conversation as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But I knew that something had shifted. We were no longer just two people on a date, passing the time with light conversation. Something deeper was unfolding between us, and I could feel it in the quiet moments that passed as we sat together in the car. The world outside faded away, leaving just the soft hum of the engine and the warmth of Daniel's presence beside me. In that moment, it felt as though the walls between us had come down. We weren't just talking anymore, we were opening up, sharing things that were often left unsaid. He spoke in a way that felt raw, vulnerable, and real. It was as if, in that small space between us, we were becoming more than just acquaintances, more than just two people on a date. We were two people connecting on a level that I had never experienced before. And then, as if to seal the unspoken bond between us, Daniel leaned in. His kiss was gentle, tentative, but in that moment, everything felt right. It wasn't just a kiss, it was an affirmation, a recognition of everything we had shared up until that point. And though it caught me off guard, I knew, without a doubt, that I wanted to see where this connection would go. Thank you for taking the time to watch our videos. If you find the content useful and interesting, Don't forget to like, share, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Our channel will always update attractive, inspiring, and useful content for you. Click the bell icon to receive notifications as soon as there are new videos. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue to develop. Thank you and see you in the next videos.